vast, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Stories. It matters the stories we tell ourselves. The stories we're mostly inundated with are the stories of the news. We need to hear the stories of the news, but they're not the only stories. I love that the Jataka tales are ancient and wise, passed through space and time of the Buddha waking up to become the Buddha, because there are stories. I was thinking I'm going to work on this in the next few days. We'll spend a little bit of time asking Sangha members. I'll be sending some of you whose voices haven't been heard in the last months, maybe to share a story so we can hear each other's Jataka stories, our own waking up stories. We've all got them. And often they're fall down, get up stories. And it takes imagination to see our lives and the world as the Buddha Dharma unfolding. It's the whole world awakening, and that we're an intimate part of it. So I wanted today, I'm going to share another Jataka story. But I wanted to start with Norman Fisher's book, The World Could Be Otherwise, Imagination and the Bodhisattva Path. He says, maybe some of you know, is that he wanted to call the book The World Is Otherwise. It's not what we think it is. It's much more alive and well, it's an unfolding of love, which is really different than what we perceive when we listen to the news. Sounds like a story of suffering, and it's that too. So I thought I would just, he brings forward, so does Raf Martin in his commentaries on the Jatakas, and Raf has agreed to come and talk to us. He'll do it on a Thursday morning, so I'm hoping we can round up the Tuesday afternoon people too. He'll do it at the beginning of September. Is that these Jataka tales are all about the core teachings and the Four Noble Truths and the Bodhisattva vow but I want to start with Norman's words here about the Four Noble Truths. I used to think the Four Noble Truths were, it's like, yeah, that was the beginning teaching. And then Mahayana came along and we got much more sophisticated. But you know what? You have the ground of the Four Noble Truths is actually so beautiful. Suffering. All conditioned existence is characterized by dissatisfaction and suffering. Most of the stories we believe in our own head and that we're told are characterized by dissatisfaction and suffering. Origination. Dissatisfaction and suffering originate in the failure of our imagination to see things as they truly are. We see things in little black and white boxes. Stopping. We can stop suffering by opening our imaginations to the truth of how things are and enter the peace of nirvana. Find ease and peace right here in this very existence. As John Kabat-Zinn says, we can find happiness and contentment and health and wholeness and ease of well-being right here, right in the midst of suffering. Doesn't mean ignoring it or going under it or over it. It's just right through the center. The path, the way to effect this opening is through practice of the Buddhist path of right conduct, right understanding, and right cultivation of mind and heart. Norman goes on to say that Mahayana, and I would say Theravadan, because the Jataka tales are they're from the Tripitaka, they're from the earliest Buddhist teachings. I think there's a false division between the early teachings and Mahayana. I think it's always all been mixed up together. It's just different descriptions came forward at different times, different emphases, but the purpose, as Norman affirms, was always compassion. The endless caring and salvific activity that would relieve the suffering of infinite beings throughout time and space. The Buddha portrayed by Mahayana Buddhist scriptures and the bodhisattvas waking up to be Buddha in the Jataka tales are about an imaginary embodiment of love. That each person at the core, and I would say not just each person, because we're learning in the Jataka tales, is in each animal, each being, at the core is a Buddha in potential. So instead of being just anchored in dissatisfaction and suffering and pain and the striving to overcome pain, we wake up to that what makes suffering painful is that we identify it as mine. It's my suffering. In fact, the suffering I experience is not mine. It's the common human suffering, and understanding the loss and pain connect me to others and to life. It's like, oh, Buddha, I wish this wasn't painful right now, but oh, thank you, because I'm a human being and I'm suffering, and human beings across time and space have had the experience of this suffering in one way or another, and it's all here to wake us up to compassion. Embracing it fully, I see it as an expression of the radical identity of all things. Experiencing suffering like this, suffering ends, and it transforms into love. And loving without limit, I dedicate myself to others and the world. It penetrates our little self-bubbles. We become more porous. And it doesn't mean this me doesn't feel sad or hurt or disappointed or betrayed or on and on. But more and more we understand and we bow. Because it tenderizes our hearts. It breaks our hearts. We find strength and character in the midst of it. More and more we understand our life isn't just our own, and it never was. And we are all like the Jataka tales, bodhisattvas waking up to be the Buddha that we already are. I thought I'd just read you because Norman describes in then about imagination is feeling for another, and he describes being in Japan with a group of other practitioners, and I was one of the other practitioners. We were there, and we went to a heiji, and Suzuki Roshi's son, Witsu, greeted us. It was so sweet. And he gave us a little tour. His assistant at Aheiji, which is the kind of big highfalutin, it's the main training monastery in Japan, was a Buddhist monk, is a Buddhist monk, but he's also a kindergarten teacher, which says a lot. There's a simplicity to this, and Witsu and Suzuki Roshi, I think, really embodied that. The teachings are deep and certainly Dogen you can study forever, and they're very, very simple. Here's just a little thing that Witsu said to us. I remember crying when he said this. Witsu Hojin-san said, "East, west, a person of Zazen is the same. Grandmother mind, the kind heart, is imagination. Feeling for another, see them as yourself, takes imagination. Imagination expands the heart. One day woke, heard sound in both ears, suddenly hearing loss. My eyes don't work right either." Maybe this is happening to some of us. "Age is slowly melting my body. With each loss, there's gain. My ears, my eyes, more mine now than ever. Before, not. So when I lose my life to death, will my life be owned by me more then than it ever was? So when I lose my life to death, will my life be owned by me more then than it ever was?" So here's a Jataka tale about the banyan deer. I want to dedicate it to my sister, whose birthday was yesterday. Myra on Tuesday talked about, one of our Sangha members talked about Bambi. I don't know if you all saw Bambi. She remembers that Bambi's mother, she brought forward that Bambi's mother died in the fire. And I remember my sister and I were talking about it yesterday, that on her 5th birthday, we all went to the movie theater to see Bambi. It was her birthday party. And when Bambi's mother died in the fire, my sister began to weep uncontrollably. And I really remember, as the older sister, that my mother took her out into the lobby of the theater and told her that she was ruining the birthday party. Those things happened, and they happen. But these stories, little tender hearts, Bambi's mother died in the fire. Maybe those stories are the stories that tenderized us and brought us to practice. Who knows? It makes me love my sister, and Myra brought it forward too. And then I found actually that that because the banyan deer story is a Jataka tale that originated in India, the first um, animated film that India did in the 50s was the banyan deer, and it was a Disney Bambi person who helped them. So these things bounce back and forth across time and space. Here's the story. It's Jataka number 12. Its original title is Nigrodhamiga Jataka. Once, the Buddha was born as a banyan deer, and when he was grown, he became leader of the herd. He guided his herd wisely and led them to the heart of a secluded forest where, sheltered by the giant trees, they lived free from danger. And then a new king came to power over the land. And above all things, this king loved hunting. As soon as the sun rose, he would mount his horse and lead his men. I'm not going to try to make this gender neutral, but I'm going to acknowledge. Most of the figures here are men, but we can use our imagination. He would lead the people on a furious chase through fields and meadows, forests and glens, and shooting arrows madly. He would not leave off until the sun had set. And then the wagons rolled back to the palace behind him, filled now with deer, boar, rabbit, pheasant, monkey, leopard, bear, tiger, and lion, and the king was happy. His people, however, were not pleased. Fields had been ruined by the royal hunt. Farmers and merchants had been forced to leave off their work in order to beat the jungles and drive the hidden beasties towards the waiting king and his men. Affairs of state, too, lay unattended. The people determined to bring all this to an end, and they devised a simple plan. They built a stockade deep in the forest. "We'll trap a herd or two of deer in this stockade," they said, "and then the king can hunt all he wants. Let him hunt to his heart's content. He won't ruin our fields or force us to leave our shops. Then let him be happy." The stockade was built, and 2 herds of deer were driven into its walls. The gates were closed, and the delicate animals, charging and wheeling in frantic circles, sought some way out, but there was none. Exhausted at last, they stood trembling, awaiting their fate. And the men left happily to tell the king of their success. But one of the herds that had been captured was the herd of the banyan deer. The banyan deer walked among his herd. Sunlight played on his many-branched antlers. His black eyes shone, and his muzzle was wet. "The blue sky is overhead. Green grass grows at our feet," he told the others. "Do not give up. Where there is life, there is hope. I will find a way." And so he strove to ease their fears. So the king arrived to view the newly captured herds. He was pleased. He strung his bow in preparation for the hunt. Noticing 2 deer kings below, he said, "The leaders of both herds are magnificent animals. No one is to shoot them. They shall be spared." Then, standing on the wall, looking down over the stockade, he sent his arrows flying into the milling herds, and the deer became frantic. Racing wildly, they injured one another with horns and hoofs as they sought to escape the deadly rain of arrows. And so it went. Every few days, the king and his courtiers would return to the stockade, and every few days more of the gentle deer were killed. Many others were wounded by the flying arrows, and still others were injured in the effort to escape. The king of the banyan deer met with the leader of the other herd. Brother, he said, shaking his antlered head sadly, we are trapped. I've tried every way, but all are barred against us. The pain of our subjects suffer is unbearable. And as you know, when the arrows fly, many get badly hurt just trying to stay alive. Let us hold a lottery. Each day, all the deer, one day from your herd, one day from mine, must pick a straw. Then the one single deer on whom the lottery falls will go stand near the wall just below the king. That one deer must offer itself to be shot. It is a terrible solution, but at least this way we can keep many others from needless injury and pain. And the leader of the other herd agreed. The next day, when the king and his courtiers arrived, they found one trembling deer standing directly below them. Its leg and body were shaking, but it held its head high. What is this? The king said. Ah, I see. These are noble deer indeed. They have chosen that one deer alone shall die rather than that they should all suffer from our hunt. Those deer kings have wisdom. And a heaviness descended on the king's heart. We will accept their terms, he announced. From now on, shoot only the one deer that stands below. And unstringing his bow, he descended from the stockade wall and rode back in silence to the palace. And that night the king tossed and turned, a radiant deer pacing through his dreams. One day the lot fell on a pregnant doe. She went to her king, the leader of the other herd, and said, I will willingly go and fulfill the lottery once my fawn is safely born. But if I go now, both I and my unborn child will die. Please spare me for now. I do not ask for myself, but for the sake of the child that is soon to be born. But the leader of the herd said, The law is the law. I cannot spare you. The lottery has fallen on you, and you must die. There are no exceptions. Justice demands that you go. In desperation, she ran to the banyan deer. She fell on her knees before him and begged for his aid. He listened quietly, observing her with wide and gentle eyes. Rise, sister, said the banyan deer, and go free. You are right. The terms of the lottery require that only one need die. Therefore you shall be freed from the lottery before your fawn is born. I will see that it is done. Too overjoyed for words, the grateful doe bowed and then bounded away. And the banyan deer rose to his feet. There was no other he could send to take her place. He had spared her. Therefore, he himself must replace her. How could it be otherwise? He walked calmly, with great dignity, through his browsing herd. They watched him as he moved among them. His great curving antlers and strong shoulders, his shining eyes and sharp black hoofs all reassured and comforted them. Never had their banyan deer king let them down. Never had he abandoned them. If there was a way, he would find it. If there was a chance to save another, he would take it. Not once had he lorded it over them. He was king indeed, and the whole herd took comfort in his presence. The courtiers were waiting with bows drawn atop the stockade, and when they saw it was the deer king who had come to stand below, they called out, O king of the banyan deer, you know our king has speared you. Why are you here? I have come so that 2 others need not die. Now shoot. You have your work, and I have mine. But lowering their bows, they sent a message to the king. Your Majesty, come with all speed to the stockade. And not long after the king arrived, riding like the wind with his robe streaming behind him. What is it? He called. Why have you summoned me? Come, your majesty, his men called. Look! And the banyan deer stood below. Then Deer King and Human King looked at one another. Banyan King, said the king of the men at last, I know you. I have seen you gliding through the forests of my dreams. Why are you here? Have I not freed you from my hunt? Great king, replied the banyan deer, what ruler can be free if the people suffer? Today a doe with fawn asked for my aid. The lottery had fallen on her, and both she and her unborn fawn were to die. The lottery requires that only one shall die, and I shall be that one. I shall take her place. The lottery shall be fulfilled. This is my right and my duty as king. A stone rolled from the king's heart. Noble banyan deer, he said, you are right. A king should care for the least of his subjects. It's a lesson I have been long in the learning, but today through your sacrifice, you have made it clear to me. So I shall give you a gift, a teacher's fee for the lesson you have taught me. You and your whole herd are free. None of you shall be hunted again. Go and live in peace. But the banyan deer said, Great king, that is indeed a noble gift, but I cannot leave yet. May I speak further? Speak on, noble deer. O king of men, if I depart to safety with my own herd, will that not mean that the remaining herd shall simply suffer all the more? Each day you shall kill only them. They will have no respite. A rain of arrows will fall upon them. While I desire above all things the safety of my people, I cannot buy it at the cost of increasing the suffering of others. Do you understand? The human king was stunned. What? He exclaimed. Would you then risk your own and your herd's freedom for others? Yes, said the banyan deer, I would. I will. Think of their anguish, great king. Imagine their suffering, and then let them too go free. The king of men paused, and he pondered, and at last he lifted his head and smiled. Never have I seen such nobility or such resolute concern. How can I refuse you? You shall have your wish. The other herd too shall go free. Now, can you go off and be with your own herd and be at peace? But the banyan deer answered, No, great king, I cannot. I think of all the other wild, four-footed creatures, and like them, I have lived my life surrounded by dangers and fears. How could I live in peace knowing the terrors they must endure? I beg you, mighty king, have pity on them. There can be no peace unless they too are free. The king of men was again astonished. He had never imagined such a thing. He thought, and slowly the truth of the banyan deer's words grew clear to him. It was true, he realized. There is no real peace unless its benefits extend to all. You are right, great deer, said the king of men at last. Never again in all my realm shall any four-footed creature be slain. They are all freed from my hunt. Rabbit, boar, bear, lion, leopard, tiger, deer, all. Never again shall they fall to my huntsman's arrows. So, my teacher, have you now found peace? But the banyan deer said, No, great king, I have not. What my lord of the defenseless ones in the air, the birds, great king, live surrounded by a net of danger. Stones and arrows shall greet them now wherever they fly. They shall fall from the skies like a rain throughout your kingdom. They shall know such suffering as can hardly be imagined. O great king, I beg you, let them go free. Release them also. Great one, said the king of men. You drive a hard bargain and are determined, it seems, to make farmers of us all. But yes, I shall free the birds. They may now fly freely throughout my realm. No man shall hunt them again. Then may they build their nests in peace. And now are you satisfied? Are you at last at peace? Great king, answered the banyan deer, think, if you will, of the silent ones in their realm, the fish, my lord. If I do not now speak for them, who will? While they swim the lakes, rivers, and streams of your land, hooks, nets, and spears will be ever poised above them. How can I have peace while they abide in such danger? Great king, I beg you, spare them as well. Noble being, said the king of men, tears trickling down his cheek. Compassionate one, never before have I been moved to think in such a way. But yes, I do so agree. The fish too are of my kingdom, and they too shall be free. They shall swim throughout my land, and no one shall kill them again. Now all of you assembled courtiers and attendants, announced the king, hear my words. This is my proclamation. See that it is posted throughout the land. From this day forth, all beings in my realm shall be recognized as my own dear subjects. None shall be trapped, hunted, or killed. This is my lasting decree. See to it that it is fulfilled. Now tell me, noble one, he said, turning to the banyan deer, once more, are you at peace? Flocks of birds flew overhead and perched singing from among the nearby trees. Deer grazed calmly on the green grass. Yes, said the banyan deer, now I am at peace. And he leapt up, kicking like a fawn. He leaped for joy, sheer joy, he had saved them all. And then he thanked the king, and gathering his herd, departed with them back into the depths of the forest. The king had a stone pillar set on the spot where he had spoken with the banyan deer. Carved upon it was the figure of a deer encircled with these words, homage to the noble banyan deer, compassionate teacher of kings. And then he too lived on, caring wisely for all beings. What a story of amazing imagination. It just kept getting bigger and bigger and deeper, and I had the thought towards the end, I remembered, because I was traveling in Montana. And when you go into the national parks, there's wildlife everywhere because nobody goes in and hunts. I just had the thought of, oh, there are so many ways to bring this to fulfillment. They're not afraid. And the minute you go outside of the national parks, you don't see any wildlife because they're all hiding, because they know they're going to be hunted. So a million ways, big and small, just letting our imagination and our hearts get bigger and bigger. So, dear bodhisattvas, imagination is feeling for another. Where does your imagination take you today? How is it helping you care for the world? Maybe some personal suffering that is asking you to see bigger, soften your eyes, maybe even tears like my 5-year-old sister. So I'm going to put you in groups of 3.